Okay, Chair. Okay, Shane, yes, we're ready.
Okay, great. Good morning, councillors, officers, members of the public and press. Welcome to this meeting of Finance and Policy Committee. This meeting is a remote meeting and it's being live streamed on our website as well as recorded. I'll now hand over to our Democratic Services team for the roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Good morning, everyone. Begin the meeting by way of a roll call for those councillors in attendance remotely, and can I request that members confirm they have a copy of the agenda and also the additional item that was being circulated over the weekend, and that they can both see and hear councillors in the meeting. Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
Yes, present, and I have all the papers, including the additional ones.
Thank you. Councillor James Brewer. No, doesn't look as though.
David, I've just had a message from James to say he's just having a few issues logging on, so he should be with us soon.
Okay, I'll continue the roll call, Chair, but if you want to pause after that in order to allow him to join, let me know. Councillor Brown?
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Lindridge?
Present, all the papers can hear and can see. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Little?
Got everything, thank you.
Councillor Marshall?
Yes to everything.
Thank you. Councillor Moore?
Yes to everything, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
I can hear you but can't see you, and I have all the papers.
Thank you. Councillor Tennant?
President, I have all the paperwork, including the additional item.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas?
Yes, but don't have the additional item papers.
Okay, we'll try and get those emailed to you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Young?
Here and have everything, thanks.
Thank you. I also believe we have in attendance Councillor Tony Richardson. Yes. And also Councillor Cassidy.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. That concludes the roll call. I'll just remind members that should we require any votes this morning, they'll be done by virtue of a roll call. And also can remind members to keep their microphones on mute during the meeting, just in order to reduce the background noise during the meeting. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, David. Just looking at item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. I haven't received any, and other than those who have been named in the roll call, is there anybody else present in this meeting today? No. Okay, item 2, declarations of interest. Seemingly have none. Thank you.
Chair, sorry. I'd like to declare a personal interest in item 5.2 as I am a trustee of the National Museum of the Royal Navy, Hartlepool.
Thank you, Councillor Akers-Belcher. Okay, we just need to have a look at the minutes for the meetings of Finance and Policy Committee held on the 19th of October. Are there any questions or comments on those minutes? Or is there any inaccuracies in there? If not, I'll take those as read. If there's no, as agreed, if there is no dissent. Thank you. And then also for the minutes of the Safer Hartlepool Partnership held on the 4th of September. Again, any questions or comments before we move on? No. Okay, thank you. If there's no dissent, we'll take those as agreed to. Item 4.1 on the agenda is the Community Safety Plan, and this will be from the Director of Neighbourhoods and Regulatory Services.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to consider the Safer Hartlepool Partnership Community Safety Plan for 2020-2021 and to refer to Council for adoption. The Crime and Disorder Act 1998 established a statutory duty for key partners to work together to address local crime and disorder, substance misuse and reoffending issues. and these responsible authorities make up the Safer Hartlepool Partnership. And we have a statutory responsibility to develop and implement a community safety strategy setting out how we intend to address these issues. In March 2020, the Safer Hartlepool Partnership Community Safety Plan 2017 to 2020 came to an end. And at its meeting of the 13th of November 2020, Safer Hartlepool Partnership agreed to the Community Safety Plan for this year. The Community Safety Plan provides an overview of some of the recent activities undertaken to improve community safety in Hartlepool and the key findings from the Safer Hartlepool Partnership's annual strategic assessment, and the public consultation can be found in Appendix 1. The Safer Hartlepool Partnership strategic objective for 2020-2021 is to make Hartlepool a safe, prosperous and enjoyable place to live, work and visit. And the key priorities are drugs and alcohol, antisocial behaviour and domestic violence. An 8-week public consultation period was carried out, and this included an online survey and direct consultation with the Cleveland Police and Crime Commissioner and Hartlepool Borough Council's Finance and Policy and Audit and Governance Committees. The delivery of the Community Safety Plan will be done by existing agencies, organisations and through partnership working, and performance will be monitored through the Neighbourhood Safety Group. It's recommended, Chair, that Finance and Policy Committee consider the content of the Community Safety Plan 2020-2021, and in accordance with the Budget and Policy Framework, Finance and Policy Committee considers making a referral to full Council for adoption of the Community Safety Plan 2020-2021. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Tony. There are no questions and comments from me, as this report has gone through the Safe Hartlepool Partnership, of which I was a part of. Is there anything from other members? I'm not getting anything through. Thanks, Tony. If there's no dissent, then we will take the recommendations as set out in the report. We'll send this to full Council for consideration and adoption. Agreed? Great, thank you very much. Item 4.2 on the agenda, the financial position update. Director of Finance and Policy.
Thank you, Chair. This report's to keep members up to date on the financial position. It's quite a comprehensive report, and since the report was prepared, we've had the spending review from the government, and unusually, the spending review included a lot of detail in respect of local government. So I'll come on to that in a moment. Normally, what we find is in the spending review, you get a few very high-level figures for local government, and you have to wait for the settlement. As I'll come on to later, there's a lot more detail. Set out in section 3, the background to the report. I think it's important to remember this context, and we'll keep repeating some of this information. The council had faced 9 years of austerity up to 1920. That had reduced the workforce by 20%. We'd made significant efficiencies and other budget cuts as well. And they were made really in response to the fact that since 13-14, core government funding is reduced by 41%. Which is a reduction of nearly £26 million. And I just think every time we look forward, we need to just reflect and remember that position, because a lot of the cuts that we've made in the past, we can't repeat. Once you've done a management restructure in an area, it's very difficult to go back, and you certainly can't repeat the same cuts. And the context is it's going to make the budget an awful lot more difficult to balance in future years. Section 4 deals with the outturn for the current year for the main budget, the general fund. We've previously said that we've split out the financial impact of COVID, so we understood what was going on with the budget in terms of normal day-to-day services rather than what was being driven by the COVID impact. And I think a couple of key issues are continuing that we flagged in the report in August, and that's the increased demand in relation to children's services and the costs. And the report provides further information in relation to those trends continuing into 21 and 22. And as we've previously reported, we're confident we can manage that overspend from managed underspends in other service budgets and lower borrowing costs that are temporary in the current year. In the appendices A to G, we provided all of the normal information we would in a monitoring report, just so that there's the full picture for members, and I didn't intend going through all of that. Section 5 deals with the COVID impact. and the financial impact on the council. I think this is sort of an unprecedented impact, and we've said that before. There was a lot of uncertainty in the early part of the year, that the Local Government Association worked with councils to assess the impact, and spending support from the government came through slowly. And I think we've set that out in the table of paragraph 5.3. So we had funding announcements that first started back in March, and the most recent one was on the 10th of October. That most recent funding announcement of an extra £1 billion is really helpful for Hartlepool. The formula for allocating that is more favourable than tranche 2 to Hartlepool, and reflects effectively deprivation type factors. So we've got a total of 9.3 million of funding in Hartlepool for COVID costs. The spending reviews also provided clarity around support for collection of fund losses in relation to council tax and business rates. We'd set out over the page at paragraph 5.7 that previously we thought there was a funding shortfall. The funding that we've received so far as definite grant from the government, and what we expect to get from the income fees and charges support, means that we're sort of nearly in balance with the estimated impact of COVID. We're about 195,000 difference, which is to the positive at the moment. Effectively, that's a contingency. There's still a long way to go between now and the end of the financial year, and still a lot of factors could change because of COVID. But to give you some context, that's only 1.6% difference on the funding, but a much more positive position in relation to government funding for COVID than we reported in August. We need to do some further work on the spending review announcements, and we'll not be able to do some of that until we get the local government finance settlement. So update members on that fully later in the year. In terms of the main part of the report, the general fund budget for 21-22, that's set out in section 6. A couple of key points in the report, and then I'll take members to some of the key issues from the spending review. We've got the updated budget forecast that's set out from 6.5 onwards. I think the main change from the previous report is further work that we've undertaken in relation to the pressures in relation to children's social care. Those pressures are increasing, and additional provision needs to be made in the budget, and paragraph 6.6 provides that detail. Before the spending review, we summarised the position in the table of paragraph 6.7. Excuse me, and that showed a budget deficit in the range of just over 4 million to potentially 6.2 million, and the variance reflected whether we get another social care grant allocation from the government, which at that stage we'd estimated at 2.2 million. In terms of the spending review announcement, as I've already said, there was a lot more information than normal, and some quite interesting comments from the Chancellor. And I think we received a letter on Friday or over the weekend that reinforced some of those messages from the local government minister. Probably the headline, that there'll be a 4.5% increase in core spending power for local authorities. There is a but to that, and that but is that the government are going to continue the adult social care precept, and that will increase to 3%. So that will be the 6th year we've had an adult social care precept. The government have also said there'll be a 5% core council tax referendum limit, and effectively, if you take the overall increase in spending power that the government have talked about for the sector of 2.2 billion, 1.2 billion the government is saying will come from council tax. So that's 55% of the headline spending power increase will only happen if councils increase council tax in line with the government's referendum limits. There is something in the spending review that talks about the adult social care precept. There'll be some flexibility to carry some of that forward if authorities choose to from 21-22 to 22-23. The settlement will provide the detail. That has happened in previous years, and members are aware of that. We don't know the detail of how that will happen for 21-22. As I've said earlier, we'd hoped that there'd be £1 billion going into the system for children and adult social care pressures. There's only actually £300 million. The government gets to £1 billion through the adult social care precept, which is 700 million. And obviously, you add the two figures together and you come to £1 billion extra for those services. Out of the 300 million grant that the government are providing for child and adult social care, 150 million is new money, and the other £150 million comes from the new homes bonus pot. That's starting to reduce again, and part of that money is being reallocated via that formula. Obviously, the report and the section in the report at 6.7 refers to a hope that we might have got 2.7 million for that adult social care and children's social care grant. It's only 700,000, so we're £1.5 million less. To give some context to that £700,000 figure, our non-pay inflation pressures just for children and adult social care is 650,000, so it's effectively all accounted for, and we get absolutely nothing in the settlement for the pressures of 2.5 million that we face in relation to children's social care. So that sort of shows how difficult the position is. I've previously referred to the government's council tax policy. Effectively, the limits they've set, and so they've reflected that in the spending power increases for the country, that effectively, for want of a better phrase, nationalises council tax increases. It continues to shift the funding onto local taxpayers rather than national taxpayers. And I think one of the things that's a worry for myself and for yourselves as councillors is authorities that choose not to implement the council tax increases set out in the government spending plans, and that is a decision for members that you'll need to make later in the year. You will find it very difficult to argue with the government for more money, because they will quite rightly turn around to you and say, we give you the tools, you didn't use the tools, that was your decision, you'll live with the consequences. And that is quite a blunt message that's sort of in the small print in the settlement. A few other key issues in the spending review are the government are talking about a public sector pay increase pause for 2021, with an increase of a minimum of £250 for people earning below £24,000. We estimate that will impact about 800 staff, and on the basis that the rest of the staff receive a pay freeze, the budget forecast could be reduced by something in the order of £800,000. We need to do a little bit more work on that figure as the detail comes out. The national living wage is increased by a lot less than had been indicated over the summer months. The increase is only 2.2%, and that produces a saving on the forecasts as well. On a slightly positive note, we will get a CPI increase in our grants, which we think will be about £0.5%. If that applies to all of the grants, that'll be £150,000 to £200,000 gain on the figures that we forecast. If you put all of that together, where it leaves us, we haven't got the £1.5 million social care and adults and children's grant that we'd hoped for. Effectively, if we reduce the provision for pay award and reflect the other changes, at the moment, I think we'll be at about the £4 million deficit that's set out in the report. I'd put the caveat on, I'd like to see the local government settlement in December to confirm that figure. Obviously, that at the moment, that figure is based on an illustrative 2% council tax increase, because that's the increase we've had built into the forecast for some time. If members were to take advantage of the full flexibility and potentially increase council tax by 2% plus the adult social care precept, that deficit could be reduced by approximately £1.2 million. I would emphasise that that's not a decision for today. It's just to give you an update of the information. And what I need to do is bring forward a further report that sets out all of the implications of the settlement and the pros and cons of different levels of council tax increase on the future financial sustainability of the council. Last few points in terms of the general fund budget. New homes bonus, as I've mentioned, is going to be phased out. There is still some national funding to be allocated. It appears to be it's about 150 or so million pounds, and that will obviously be addressed in the settlement. There is also some headline positive funding announcements around additional funding for homelessness and for new domestic abuse bill responsibilities on councils. So it'll be interesting to see if that fully meets those needs. And the Troubled Families programme's continuing. And we had assumed that in the budget forecast, so that's a bit of a sigh of relief in relation to that. A few other points in the spending review. There is a headline figure of £3.2 billion to help authorities manage COVID next year. Approximately half of that is additional grant. We don't know the allocations and we don't know exactly what that has to cover. But if the government are providing that funding, it would suggest there are going to be continuing costs and responsibilities on councils responding to COVID into the new year. That amount also includes £670 million, which the government have said is to support those least able to afford council tax. That seems to suggest a continuation of the scheme from the current year, where the government provided funding to make an award of £150 to local council tax households. On that one, all we know at the moment is the headline figure. So we need the detail, and I think that's going to be a settlement issue for December. I've already mentioned the positive news that the government are providing 800 million to help with collection fund deficits in the current year. We thought that regime would continue in the next year. It doesn't appear that it's going to be the case, and the first £1.5 billion may be partly to address that issue. As I say, we need the detail of that. Also, as a final point, the government are going to continue the existing support for losses of income from sales, fees and charges for a further 3 months in the new financial year. So that's also helpful. A couple of other points in the spending review that don't affect the main budget. There is a new fund called the Levelling Up Fund. It's a £4 billion fund. It is, the government have said, to fund investment in local infrastructure for projects up to £20 million. What the government have said, it's for things like bypasses, other local road schemes, bus lanes, railway station upgrades, regenerating eyesores, upgrading town centres, community infrastructure, local arts and culture. That's all we know at the moment. The government have said they'll publish a prospectus in the new year setting out more details and presumably how authorities go about accessing that funding. It feels like it'll be based on some sort of bidding process. So I think if I take you back to the report, Chair, and some of the conclusions, as I said at the start, this report's designed to keep you updated. The position's not fixed yet. It won't be fixed till we get the provisional settlement. I was on a call on Friday, and the senior civil servant indicated that it will be the week commencing the 14th of December, and I think Parliament recesses on the 17th. So I would probably bet on it's going to be later that week rather than earlier, but we'll let you know as soon as we hear more around that. So it's quite a late settlement, and I think we'd expected that. I think it's so members start thinking ahead to the next budget report when you have to make the decisions. I think given what we've been through in the last 9 years, 21, 22 will be the most difficult position. I think I'd have said that in the past, but we've had COVID overlaid on top of that. We still don't know how that will actually play out over the next few years in terms of the local economic impact, how our businesses will recover, which businesses won't survive potentially, the impact on our business rates income, similarly what's going to be the impact of unemployment. We talked about hopefully being able to give you an update today on what the impact of furloughing ending would be, because we thought it would have a negative impact. But as everybody's aware, furloughing's been extended to the end of March. So any fallout from that being withdrawn is being pushed back, so it makes it difficult to assess. So the position going forward is very uncertain. There will be very difficult decisions for members to make, but they will be really important in terms of the financial foundations of the authority for future years. Effectively, it will be January now before we can bring all of that information back for members to make those final decisions to refer to full council. At that point, Chair, you'll be happy to know I'll stop and take any questions and then take members back to the recommendations in paragraph 13 of the report.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris. There's no questions from me today. obviously, I do realise that all the recommendations that are currently in the report, they are just for noting. There's no decisions to be made today. However, I would, if I could, or rather if somebody else will support me on this, but given the appalling announcement in the spending review that the government will break with the previous 1 billion annual social care grant increase given to local authorities, and instead only give us 300 million this year of all years, the announcement was clear that they expect us, as you've just heard from Chris, to as local authorities to pick up the £700 million difference through a 3% social care precept. Therefore, I would appreciate if people do support this. I would like to add 2 further recommendations to the report. One, that we as a committee write to the Treasury, MHCLG and the Town's MP to protest at this appalling decision and demand that it be revisited. And that as part of this budget timetable and setting process, we explain the current situation to our residents and seek their views on the options of a social care precept through a meaningful public consultation. I don't know if there's... Thank you, Councillor Smith. I've got Mike Young.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think my question is in 2 parts. I'll ask the first one first, if that's all right. So you alluded to unemployment. A man was up straight away at the beginning of the report to talk about unemployment. Do we still not have any idea what unemployment looks like and how much it's gone up since COVID in the town? And are there no projections at all about what that will look like? That's the first part.
So I think on the unemployment, the way we've been assessing the impact on the council is the increase in local council tax claimant eligibility, which would reflect largely an increase in unemployment. The figures rose very rapidly at the start of the first lockdown. They've stabilised over the summer, and we're running currently with LCTS caseloads of about 8% higher than we previously thought, than when we set the budget. We previously thought that could go up by about the same again, and that's what's reflected in the report when furloughing ended. But as you're aware, the furlough decisions have been extended and extended. I still think there's a worry that at some point furloughing is keeping jobs, and rightly so, and I think it was the right policy, keeping jobs that might not survive when we move back to normal. The businesses may be left so weak that even though COVID might have ended, we might all have been vaccinated, we might all be able to go back to living as we were in the months ahead. Some businesses won't survive. It's really difficult to assess, and I think we've made the best assessment we can on the budget. We will try, and we are working to update that. But as I say, with other national decisions, it gets increasingly difficult because it remains uncertain.
Okay, that links to part 2, Chris, in the sense that the less people are employed, the less people likely there are to pay council tax, and you've just said that is fairly logical in that respect. So my concern is for those that are left paying council tax, are they not increasingly just getting further burdened with creating a solution for the gaps that we've got? And to go back to what and it's more of a rhetorical question, I suppose, Chris, because the answer is obviously yes. But to answer Shane's point, I think we've got to ask people whether they're willing to contribute to the social care precept. I think that's the right thing to do. My concern is as has happened in the past, if people come back and say no, then what is the council's position if the people say that they don't want to support that?
I suppose there's 2 parts to that question. In terms of potentially less people being able to pay council tax next year because they're receiving local council tax support, the strategy was previously based on funding that shortfall on a one-off basis from one-off reserves, and the rationale behind that was we hope that during next financial year 21-22 the economy would recover and we would largely reverse or make a significant reversal of that position. I think I previously said it might not be as positive as that, and it might take more than 1 year to reverse. I think as we've worked through the figures over the summer, with the peak being lower, and I think the peak will be lower than we originally worked out, I think what will happen is it might longer, and it might be that the costs that we worked out on, I think when we first worked out the impact, we thought COVID was going to be something that was hit quite quickly, and then the economic impact reversed, and I think that's what a lot of commentators have said, but it's gone on longer. It hasn't been as deep, so we've taken, so in effect, that's not impacting on the core budget problem too much. The issues that are driving the core budget problem are the fact that government core grant is only going to increase by 0.5%, which is only £200,000. We aren't getting the grants that we'd hoped for children and adult social care, and we've got huge financial pressures, particularly in relation to children's social care, that we need to fund. That's what's driving the budget gap. In terms of the impact on all of those people who pay council tax, the increase is effectively determined by, because the government's policies are building those into the system, and that's effectively built into the funding settlements, as I've just alluded to, in terms of only a 0.5% increase in core grant and only 300 million this year, as opposed to the £1 billion for adult social care. So it's more the national policy that's driving the council tax increase, because what it's facing or forcing members to do is either increase council tax to protect services, or quite simply to cut services. And we've still built in housing growth forecasts.
Councillor Young, were you wanting to come back?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just the hand kept going up and down. I don't know why it was doing that. Technology. I think it's a fair assessment what you've given there, Chris. I think my only concern is that if the money's down in terms of social care, then in terms of a market, does that not then hopefully have, I know it probably doesn't have, but does it not hopefully have a knock-on effect where it drives the cost down of those services? Because if the market is less lubricated, then the charges that are coming from maybe some of the private providers, particularly I'm thinking of children in looked after care, then if the money isn't there, then there's got to be some kind of logical response from them where those costs have to be less profit driven and more sensible in that respect. Would you not agree?
I think one of the things that we've highlighted in the report is, Hartlepool is a small player in the market. We are one of the second smallest unitary in the authority. There is a lot of work going on at the regional level with the directors of children's services, trying to work out a way of actually can we get a control of the market. But even the northeast, small in terms of the market, and particularly the specialist care. I think what we set out in the report is part of the pressure to deal with the increase in children needing support will be to actually open our own home, because the figures indicate that that's a lot more cost effective. We've indicated in the report 25% more cost effective than external placements. But obviously, and I think Sally's on the call, reopening or opening children's homes is a challenging process to go through. I think Sally and the team have already done it successfully, but it's something you have to do on an incremental basis. So it is a challenge. So there is a recognition of that. I think the other part of the equation of pressures is for adults' social care, and I think what we'll find is probably continuing pressure from the care homes because of the impact of COVID and the extra costs they've had to bear. So that's one that we'll have to work through as well.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Tennant.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I just want to come back to your extra recommendations that you suggested. As with Councillor Smith, I completely agree with those extra recommendations. I just would like to perhaps suggest an extra to those extras by asking government to consider whether it might be more prudent to have a 2-year spending review rather than a 1-year spending. I know this is something that Chris has raised before, and I actually think this is probably a more sensible approach to financial forecasts in the future, rather than having to consistently look at the problems year on year and actually have a longer lead in, so that we can deal with problems more longer term. So I wonder if that could be added to the recommended letter to the Treasury. As well as that, I'd like to thank Chris for giving very
point of order, Chair, if I can. Point of order.
Councillor Young.
The only thing, sorry, John, I'm not looking to cut you there, but the only concern that I would have with that is if we're only getting year-on-year spending reviews, it's really difficult for Chris and his team to try and manufacture something that would technically be a waste of time. In the fact, based on that fact, we're just working year-on-year.
Sorry, Chair, I wasn't suggesting asking Chris to do that. I was asking whether we could add it to the letter to the Treasury, whether the Treasury can, look at a more proactive approach to the way they fund local authorities in a 2-year spending review rather than a 1 year.
Okay. And what were you saying after that? What were you saying after that, Councillor Tennant?
Sorry, say that again, Chair.
You had a second point you were making before.
Oh, sorry, that's right. Yes. Yeah, it was just to thank Chris for giving us a very, very full and frank and open report, which really does set out exactly where the difficulties are. And it's quite obvious that councillors are once again being stuck between a rock and a hard place, where the governments are not helping on the one hand, and of course, there's always going to be members of the public who are going to feel disappointed by some of the potential decisions we might have to make. So we can't win one way or another. I agree that we need to look at the social care aspect, and Councillor Young has, he set out that quite clearly, and we do need to look at that review. So yeah, just want to say thanks to Chris for that, and hopefully we can find a way forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tennant. Councillor Little.
Thank you, Chair. How many children do we have in care at present? I know last year it was over 300. Is it the same now, or is it, because obviously when we're making these decisions, I know we're not making a decision today, but the people of Hartlepool need to know what exactly we're looking at, because then, but not as 310. We need to, I like to break it down as like a primary school or 1.5 primary schools or a year group, just so I find visuals like that a lot better than a figure, because figures are nothing. But if you had a school figure and that's how many children we've got in care, I find that really, really helpful. I think Sally's on, but I'm not quite sure.
She is, yeah, and she's got a hand up. Sally, would you like to come in on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So as at today, there were 357 children in the care of the local authority. In terms of giving you a comparison, Councillor Little, that's a medium-sized primary school. We tend to work on rates per 10,000, which is about 140 children per 10,000 population. Of the child population.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you. Can I come back, because I've got another one as well, if you don't mind? But it's for Jill mainly. Are we still giving our nursing homes an extra percentage on top of the weekly monies for PPE and agency work? Because obviously I know that's coming out of a different budget, probably the COVID budget, but I think people don't realise what our homes, the pressures that they're being put under. Obviously when staff have gone ill or have to self-isolate, this is putting extra pressures on our care homes, and I think this needs to be highlighted for how much extra. So when we go into that to our residents and saying, look, this is the reasons why we're putting things up, we're not doing it because we want to, we're doing it because we need to protect our most vulnerable people in the town. Thank you.
Jill, were you wanting to come in on that?
Yep, just to provide an update in relation to the COVID premiums that Councillor Little referred to. We implemented premium payments for our care providers back in March. They've been reviewed regularly and varied a number of times. We actually ceased the premium payments from the 1st of November, but that was because there were some national funding streams put in place that replaced the funding we were providing. So care providers are currently receiving free PPE from the government, which is guaranteed up until the end of March next year, and also the Infection Control Fund, and that's a fund that they are using for things like self-isolating and additional support to make the homes COVID safe in terms of visiting. So we maintained the COVID premium payments until those national funding streams were made, well, not permanent, but till the end of the year.
Thank you.
Okay. Has anybody else had any questions or comments on this report? Okay. If Councillor Lindridge, your hand flashed up and then went down. Are you wanting to speak or not?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I had a good 2-hour read through the papers, and obviously it was just a report to note, quite comprehensive, but it's been preempted, I think, with Chris's additional information. And it's obviously important that we need to take any considerations at a later date, you know, to get a full assessment. I was actually looking at 4.4, under 4.2, should I say. I was surprised by the business rates that had been only 3.1 down, which I took that as a positive, to think I expected year on year for the business rates to be a little bit worse than that. So that's a good positive from the town in collecting the business rates. Could I ask Chris, in terms of 6.7, you said earlier on in your update that we could save potentially 1.2 million reduction from the 4.053 million, right? If we had a 2% council tax increase with an additional 3% adult precept. I think everybody would be against the council tax increase to put more pressure on residents. However, could you tell me what the difference would be if we had no council tax increase, but we had full 3% adult precept, which I think would be more favourable? Would that reduce the 4.053 million? How much by? Chris?
Yes. Sorry, I was just going to lower me.
Sorry,
you're trying to unmute.
Sorry.
Yep. Just a comment on the business rates. An awful lot of businesses don't have to pay the business rates this year because the government provided a grant. So that has, I'll be honest, made it a bit easier in respect to businesses, but equally to recognise that the government have provided an awful lot of funding. I think from memory it's about £18 million worth of business rates relief has come to Hartlepool through the government's policy, and that's across the country, and they are for the smaller businesses. So it's been great support for businesses, and that's actually helped my team because we haven't been chasing quite so many accounts. But I think it was very important, you know, that I'll point out where I think the government have failed to provide funding, but I think equally I should always point out where they've put their hands in their pockets and have provided appropriate support both for businesses and effectively the council. So the council tax question. If I take members to the table at 6.7, the deficit range in those forecasts is based on a 2% increase. And we said that way back that was a planning assumption. Because contribute to a precept instead, the difference is approximately £400,000. So the deficit of 4 million would come down by approximately £400,000.
That's quite substantial, and I think it's something obviously we need to consider carefully. It would obviously be better to have a lesser deficit, but obviously it would be an increase in some form it'd probably be more acceptable on a social care precept rather than council tax increase. That's just from I would think that from an emotional point of view. However, you still have to pay it out, and that's the key. But something we can discuss later. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Councillor Lindridge. Councillor Young.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. I think my question goes back to what happened in government, and Robert Jenrick was, as the Minister for Communities, Housing and Local Government, taking over, working with Simon Clarke at the time, I think, MP. Weren't they supposed to be getting support from the Treasury to ensure that there wasn't need for a council? Some of that's been covered in your report, but I think that if government have said one thing, why are they now kind of backpedaling as quickly as they are?
Chris?
I think that, to be honest, is a question for the government to answer. It was interesting. I listened to this Chancellor's spending review speech in Parliament. I've had a quick read through. I think there are 106 here in relation to council tax, and I think all of the decisions around tax will be for a future spending review. It's the government's policy. All I can do is inform members of the government's policy. I don't understand the rationale behind it. That's decided elsewhere.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so obviously we'll pick this up at future meetings of Finance and Policy as well. But if people are happy with the recommendations as set out in the report, and then also there was additional recommendations proposed and seconded. If people are happy with that without any dissent, we can take them all as one, or if you'd prefer to take them as in the report and then the additional ones, we can do it that way. Is there any preference?
All together.
Okay, so we'll take them all together then. Recommendations as set out in the report: to note the report, to invite all Finance and Policy Committee members to the January Finance and Policy Committee, and plus the additional ones that I set out at the start. Any dissent? No, thank you. Next one then, 4.3, COVID-19 Recovery and Renewal Plan, as well as the Council Plan for 2020 to 23. Managing Director.
Thank you, Shane. Morning, everybody. This report is to provide members with an update on the progress made in delivering the COVID-19 Recovery and Renewal Plan, which was agreed by Finance and Policy back in August. And the report also outlines a proposal to undertake further work to develop the new council plan before bringing it into council for adoption before the end of this municipal year. And prior to the COVID pandemic, work was underway to prepare for a new council plan, which covered us for this year and up to 22-23. And the idea would be, ideally, if we would have taken that to a meeting in March for council to adopt. Unfortunately, this meeting didn't take place, and we all know the reasons why. It has also enabled us to actually focus on delivering the recovery plan. So during the summer, we were able to start considering how we might respond to recovery, because we actually entered the recovery phase, but everyone's fully aware we are now still dealing with the second wave and response, and the impact that that's having on the resources in the council is quite significant. And I think it's clear that we must continue focusing on the response, and bearing in mind what might be coming over the horizon following Christmas. I wouldn't put any money on us not having a third wave to deal with, but I'm not a director of public health. In spite of the challenges the council continues to face in relation to the ongoing pandemic, we have been able to make some good progress in the delivery of the recovery plan, and there's a summary of that in Appendix 1 for members to note. Progress in some areas has and will slow down as we continue to focus on responding to the plan, but we will continue to report progress to Finance and Policy Committee on a regular basis. It's important that we reflect on what's happened during this municipal year and actually look at and take any details from this financial year into the new proposed council plan. And we'll do that, and this corporate management team will take some time in the next few months to actually do that piece of work, and we'll be bringing the council plan to finance and policy and then on to council before the end of this year. There are recommendations set out in section 14.1, Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments from members? Councillor Young.
Yeah, only to say really, like, thanks very much for everything that continues to go on. It's almost like there doesn't appear to be light at the end of the tunnel, and council officers are still working sometimes in a redeployed capacity, often at short notice, and trying to handle something that nobody's had to handle before. So we've got to give thanks where it's due and praise where it's due, and that's to everybody really who's had to step up and move things forward and make the best of what has been a really troublesome period of time. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Mike says there and express a thanks to all concerned. That there has been a lot of hard work done, and it's great to see how our systems are still continuing throughout this. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. Denise, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, it was just to thank members for recognising the work that officers on the front line who were actually out there from, litter picking to actually being social care providers and looking after our children and vulnerable adults, as well as those who are having to work from home. So everyone's absolutely working, as you've rightly acknowledged, flat out dealing with what we are dealing with as well. But that is having a huge impact on resources. So it's really appreciated that members recognise that. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. I know this year has been a rough one, but I think there is some good news on the horizon, I think, and there are some little lights we can look forward to. And I think as a former Tory councillor used to often tell me, Councillor, he's the Alderman now, or a Freeman, George Morris, we can only go onwards and upwards. So, right, the recommendations then, if there's no dissent, we'll take that. Agreed? Thank you. Back to you, Chris, for council tax base and section 106 policy.
Thank you, Chair. This report just gives some information that members had requested in August. Section 3 deals with the council tax base. We've attached as an appendix the detailed calculation for the current year. I think the interesting thing that shows is, although there are 44,000 properties in the borough, effectively when you work through the calculation, that converts into just under 25,000 Band D equivalents. If you had more houses in the higher bands than we do, that conversion rate would be different, and you'd have a higher overall tax base, and that's just a fact of how council tax works. We've set out the changes. We've gone back all the way to 2004-5 and shown the growth in the tax base. It's been higher since 13-14. On average, 398 properties added at a Band D level each year, compared to only 141 in the previous period. So that's been really, really positive. We've gone on to explain that historically, since 13-14 up to the current year when we set the tax base, the split of why that change had happened, 64% of the growth was driven by actually new properties in the borough, and 36% was because over that period we'd seen a reduction in local council tax support claimants. And I think that really reflected a better economic position over that period than at the start of 13-14. Obviously, we've touched on earlier today that some of those trends in relation to LCTS have been significantly reversed in the current year in a very short period. Another couple of interesting points that we've highlighted from the analysis. as well as increasing the tax base, the number of properties in the higher bands, which I've defined as bands E to H, has increased. It's a slow change, and those figures are set out in the table at the top of page 3. But that's worth nearly £2.5 million in extra recurring income. That's already built in the base. It's already been spent. So you can't spend it again in case anybody thinks we can. And the other point is our tax base, if you compare it in percentage terms, because obviously we're the smallest unitary in the Tees Valley, in percentage terms, our growth's been above the average, which again is a positive impact, and that has a positive impact on the budget, and that's reflected in the figures also. Section 4 deals with Section 106 contributions. As members are aware, they're provided to address various issues in relation to affordable homes, highways, impact, educational requirements, and so on. They are a factor in the viability of all developments, as are factors such as the price of the land, the construction costs, the level of fit-out costs that the builders determine, that the quality that they'll put into houses, and clearly the other factor in whether a site is viable is the price they can sell the houses at. And I think if you looked at particularly national builders, it's a business that in the good times can make very good gross profits, and that's just a function of the housing market. We've highlighted that 71%, just under 3.2 million of Section 106 contributions in the last 5 years have been achieved for affordable housing, and they've had a huge impact in supporting the development of the housing revenue account. I think we all recognise in the context of the budget that growing housing is vital. It will help the financial sustainability of the council. We've highlighted in paragraph 4.8 of the report that each development does have its own requirements. It's sometimes very difficult to compare individual sites. They are very unique in terms of the condition of land, actually location for desirability of where people want to live, and a whole range of other factors. But it might be, if its members' wishes, beneficial to review the 106 contribution policy of the council to see if that is causing any barriers. And we do, as we set out in the report, have very positive conversations with landowners and developers. And I think as part of that work, if that's what members want us to do, we'd need to gather comparative data with the Tees Valley and the wider North East region. And just to highlight, linked to that, there are some proposed national changes that we don't know the detail yet. The government have consulted on them, and obviously when we know the outcome of that consultation, we'll need to bring back a further report, because that'll have longer term implications. And the recommendation, Chair, is just for members to note the report.
Thank you, Chris. I think for me, it is just good to see that we have still continued to have a significant amount of growth in the borough over the past couple of years, and importantly, rebalancing that council tax base, which is vitally important for our, I almost said coffers, that's not the right word I'm looking for our budget. Yeah, are there any questions or comments from other members? No. Okay, then the recommendations, as Chris mentioned, were to note the report. Everybody agreed? Great, thank you. Item 5.1, reprocurement of the Tees Integrated Sexual Health Service. Incorrectly in my papers refers to Craig as the Acting Director of Public Health, so I'd welcome our new Director of Public Health, Craig Pundred.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, this paper is outlining the proposal to reprocure the Tees Integrated Sexual Health Service with a view to commencing the new service on the 1st of August 2021. We have a statutory duty to commission sexual health services along with our partners in the CCGs and NHS England and NHS Improvement Services. They were last commissioned in August 2016 across Teesside for 5 years with an option to extend for 2 times 24 months periods, and Virgin Care Services were the successful bidders at the time and are currently delivering that service. They have rejected in the offer of a 12-month extension, and that has resulted in the collaborative commissioners moving to procure the new service. The current services are commissioned by 6 different commissioning bodies, the local councils in the 4 areas, CCG, and the NHS England. And the table in there that you've seen in your papers outlines the composition of those services. We have seen recent changes in outcomes and performance, and the obviously ongoing situation with COVID-19 has driven the need to have a look at the model and refresh our ideas as to how we want to commission that. And there has been a needs assessment been taken, and that's been refreshed, along with collation of views from stakeholders as well. And so the result of that is that a new service performance review and service specification has been developed to go forward with this. There have been some changes to that model. We've obviously found new ways of working during the COVID pandemic have led to some improvements in things like virtual sessions and that side of things, which have been really positive. We've also found that we need to do some work to look at narrowing the inequalities associated with poor sexual health outcomes, and we've developed ways of producing that within the new specification. And we're also looking at ways that we can improve with the monitoring and understanding of how the service is operating. So I think it's a really good opportunity to really improve sort of outcomes and improve our knowledge of those as well as we go forward with this new proposal. You'll have seen in the paper as well that we've provided some information which backs up some of the challenges we've had previously around that in terms of the outcomes. So the proposal is that we work alongside our partners to recommission this service now. I think it's helpful to say at this point that realistically, because of the funding arrangements, it would be almost impossible to commission this on our own. So we would need to continue with the collaborative commissioning arrangement. That's worked well for us over the last 5 years, and I think we should really maintain that system as well and maintain the collaboration, as I think it's the best way we can get the best outcomes through our sexual health services. The timetable is listed there, and we hope to go out to procurement as quickly as we can to make sure everything is in place for the 1st of August. And the risks there are identified as the challenges we have if we don't commission this at this point in time. So that's an overview of where we are with the sexual health commissioning at this point in time. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Craig. Just for clarity, was there a reason, what is the reason that the current provider declined to extend the current contract by 12 months?
I think they were looking at, because the contract specifically stated 24-month extensions, they were wanting to remain within the contractual obligations.
Understandable, thank you. Councillor Lindridge. You're still muted, Jim.
Apologies. Yes, I think it is important. This is recommissioned, and I think we've got.
You've muted yourself again.
Apologies again. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I think we've got to sort of work collectively with our partners on this. We can't just stay singular. We've got to share the responsibility. I would just like to ask Craig, in terms of past performance, if you put it that way, under Appendix B 5.1, it's under 18 conceptions. Yeah, I think it's all about education, education, and education. I think we need to be raising the awareness in sexual relationships, to sort of give a better quality of life to our young people right within the town. And I'd like to see the authority liaise with the remaining partners in Tees Valley, so that we have a collective responsibility, not just in Hartlepool. We have had high figures, and I think we all would agree that needs to be improved. So what are your views on this, Craig?
Yes, you're absolutely right to pick that out from the data there, and it is an area we are concerned about, and I think that's one of the obviously contributes to one of the reasons why we'd like to change how we look at the service specification as well going forward. And we are looking at the offer we're going to develop around prevention, and we've decided to look at it separately because it is so important that we really do focus more on that. And we are in the process of developing a new sort of structure to look at how we deliver those prevention activities moving forward with the new contract. So yes, it is crucial that we do look at that. We are aware that it is, as you've quite highlighted, that it's one of the higher areas we need to bring down. But I think there is a will to do that and a will to work across the partners to do that as well. So we will be including that within the prevention offer next year.
Good. That's good. That I would really welcome that intervention. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lindridge. Any other questions or comments from members? No. Okay, so the recommendation then is for us to approve us going out to re-procurement for this service. Is there any dissent? No. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, hang on. No, it's changed slightly, hasn't it? So 5.2, key decision for the National Museum of the Royal Navy review report from the Director in Resources and Development.
Thank you, Chair. This report's basically quite a short report, and it sets out a proposal to extend the existing lease from June 2021 to June 2022. The financial consequences are set out in the not-for-publication part of the report. Without going into the detail of any of those figures, the agreement has seen reducing annual subsidy payments from the council, so that over 5 years, effectively, we've reduced significantly. And the proposal before members, if they agree to the extension, would be to agree to extend the subsidy for a further 12 months also, but that would also have a sixth annual reduction applied to the amount of support. I think the report sets out in a little bit of detail some of the issues that have obviously been faced by the National Museum for the Royal Navy operating this year. I think the report sets out it makes sense for both parties to extend the lease. There's a lot of effectively exciting developments coming forward in relation to the capital developments linked to the museum. But to enable that to happen, we do need to extend the lease, and that's what's recommended in the report. So the recommendations are there for members to consider.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Lindridge.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I think it's really important that we continue the partnership with the Royal Navy. There's going to be, it's really progressive. Yeah, and in the next few years, even though we've had a bit of a restriction with COVID, we've got to see the real potential in this and the benefit from it. So I would be supportive of the recommendations on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. I'm with you, to be honest. I think it was a really great coup that we managed to get the National Museum of the Royal Navy here previously, and I think we should do what we can to make sure that partnership continues, especially during this difficult time. Are there any other questions or comments from members? If not, are members happy to agree with the recommendations as set out in the report? There's no dissent. Great, thank you very much. Next item then, 6.1, allocation of the community pot, Director of Adult and Community-Based Services.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall at a previous meeting there was an agreement to create a community pot using one-off resources, and that was to be used to support people who were experiencing hardship, particularly where that had been exacerbated by COVID-19. So the pot that was created was 225,000, and it was agreed that £25,000 of that would be used specifically for activities for young people. And the report sets out in section 3.4 how that's being utilised. Then the proposed criteria for the remaining 200,000 are set out in section 4. And there has already been some engagement with the voluntary and community sector in recent months in relation to recovery planning and how we can work more collaboratively. So it's assumed that this will be received very positively by the VCS, and we propose to formally launch the community pot with the sector if members are in agreement to the proposals today. So the detail of the process is set out in section 5, and it's proposed that the recommendations for how the funding is allocated come back to Finance and Policy Committee for approval in the new year. Section 7 sets out how the community pot was created, and there are no ongoing financial considerations as the community pot has been created from one-off resources. The recommendation is that members note the proposals and agree with the criteria and the process that's outlined, and hopefully that, if approved, means that we can get this launched with the VCS in the next couple of weeks and get the funding allocated as soon as possible. There's some detail in the appendices in terms of the funding for young people, and also the proposed form that will be used for partners wishing to request funding from the pot. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jill. I think it's great that we finally got this report before us and that we're able to make some movement on it. There are some amazing organisations out there in Hartlepool doing some fantastic work, and I just hope that this pot is going to be able to assist them in delivering that work that they've been doing, and hopefully sustaining new projects moving forward. Are there any questions or comments from members? No, no, no. Councillor Lindridge? Yeah.
So I would just like to endorse what you've said there, Shane. I think it's really important we have this community pot, and more so at this particular time with the COVID. There's a lot of mental health issues with young people, and I think the project itself, you know, will give the opportunities. I'll give people a window of hope, so to speak. You know, they've had some positivity. So it's really important. And if we're working with the VCS, right, I don't think anybody be disagreeing with the way we are looking to fund these organisations. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, if there's no other comments or questions from members, we'll look at the recommendations. Okay, and the recommendation is to approve the proposed criteria and allocation process for the community pot and receive further reports regarding successful projects in due course. Is there any dissent from those recommendations? Okay, thank you very much. Item 7.1, corporate procurement quarterly reports from the Chief Solicitor.
Thank you, Chair. This report is a short report, just in accordance with the Council's contract procedure rules, which requires that quarterly we report those contracts that have been let. There is an appendices with a table attached, and it's just for members to comment and note. Thank you.
Thank you.
Noted.
Great. It's quite clear. Thank you, Councillor Young. Has everybody else noted that, or are there any questions? Okay, no one's making any suggestion, so thank you very much. Move on to the next one. 7.2, dry recycling contract examination of future options. Director of Neighbourhoods and Regulatory Services.
Thank you, Chair. The Council's current curbside collection method is commingled glass, paper, cardboard, plastics, metals all in one bin. and the contract for that is currently with Palms Recycling Limited. Initially, the contract was for 3 years with an additional 2 one-year options, and we are currently in the first of those, which is due to expire at the end of March 2021, which was agreed originally in December 2019. Discussions have taken place with Palm to extend the contract into the final year. However, due to the implications of COVID and their move to a new business model, it's unlikely that an agreement will be reached to extend that final year contract. Therefore, it's proposed that a new dry recycling contract for the sorting, processing and sale of the council's dry recycling materials be procured on the basis of the commingled tender documents can be found in confidential Appendix 1. Therefore, it's recommended that committee notes the requirement for a new dry recycling contract and the sale of the council's materials, which will be undertaken under a co-mingled arrangement. How to take any questions, Chair?
Thank you, Tony. Questions or comments from members?
Noted.
None. Okay. So we'll take the. Sorry, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was a bit last minute there. Tony, in making this transition, will we or have we got it set out to increase the amount of product that can go in our recycle bins? And a good example is, I believe as a council we can't put egg cartons in ours, yet I believe lots of other councils can. So that's probably something we're not getting quite right. But that was just a one-off example. Do we intend going forward to try and get more product into our recycling bin? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. In terms of it's where the material then goes to, it's whichever sorting plant they take that particular product to. So every plant can deal with recycling materials in a slightly different way. So it will depend upon obviously the organisations coming forward who tender for the contract and where they source that materials to, which will depend upon what materials can be taken. But at that point, if there's changes to the existing arrangements, we would obviously make residents aware of what can and can't be recycled and in line with that.
Does that, Councillor Brown, you want to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks for that, Tony. I just, yeah, for me, it would be good to try and see us, as we're doing this change, move a step forward with a company. Obviously, I realise price is probably paramount as well, especially where we are at this current moment. But it would be good to try and see us moving forward with adding more into the recycling bin, if you like. Thank you, Chair, and Tony.
I think it's a great point, Councillor Brown. Thank you. Okay, so the recommendations are as they are in the report. Is there any dissent from those recommendations? No. Great. Thank you very much. And that's it. I don't have any other items which I need to bring forward today. And so the next, let's have a look, sorry, date and time. So the next meeting, Finance and Policy, is on the 18th of January. I will see you all again, I'm sure, before then, so I won't wish you any festive greetings at this moment in time. But enjoy the rest of your week and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Sally Robinson, can I have a brief chat with you on here once everyone's gone?